Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are on this fast forward planet, which has kicked into overdrive. I used to list the reasons, the layers of change that are going on, the communication systems, the climate system, uh, geopolitics now is out of control. We have a president who just seems to be uh, devoted to, well, as Steve Bannon put it, flooding the zone with crap, and some now the crap has consequences. It used to be just words, and now it's actions. As what's unfolding in the Strait of Hormuz and around the Middle East. This is Andy Revkin. This is Sustain What, where I try to kind of generate some sense of progress amid complexity, and been doing sort of a running theme on climate communication, which has been my gig for 40 years, among others. And I was pleased to see through my friends over at Heated that Chase Kane, who's been an on-air climate correspondent at NBC News for many years, had left that sanctum and has gone out on his own. And we're in an era where adaptability and innovation are a critical component of any journalist's approach to their work going forward. When I have young people, journalism students ask me what to do, it's mostly not to do the thing that I did for most of my life, which is just sort of, you're on a freight train. I was at magazines and the New York Times. That still is a path, but you have to kind of create your own future going forward. And Chase, you're doing a good job of that. So welcome to Sustain What. And I thought, well, first of all, how are you, and where are you? By the way, where are you in the world?
Well, at this moment, yeah, and thank you for having me on, first of all, Andy. At this moment, I'm in Los Angeles, but my partner and I are actually in the process of moving from Los Angeles up to San Francisco. So staying here on the beautiful West Coast. So I'm coming to you from California. It is very much morning. I'm still having my coffee, but you're probably having lunch at this point.
Actually, I just had my late breakfast here in
Oh,
Maine.
okay. Well, then we're on the
But
same schedule.
yes, there you go. And just a quick thumbnail sketch. Actually, let's just start with this thumbnail sketch you've produced, a YouTube video that's kind of your introductory video. It says share audio, so I think we'll be able to hear it. And let's just listen and watch this fun little reprise of what you're doing.
If you are watching this, you are the reason I quit my dream job. And because of Mr. Rogers.
Let's go to the recycling place and find out more about it.
Well, this is a good thing. I promise I will explain. And after I do, I also have an invitation for you. But first, if you're like, who is this guy? Well, I'm a meteorologist. Probably 5 inches deep, and I just got splashed because I was standing too close to the road. I did the job, right? Should have predicted that, right? And I was also the first on-air reporter at NBC dedicated to covering climate change. That meant that I was reporting everywhere from NBC Nightly News to your local NBC station, and alongside some pretty famous people like Al Roker and Hoda Kotb.
Go Chase.
Is that right?
Go Chase.
Needless to say, I worked with some really talented, smart, passionate journalists at NBC for more than a decade. It was my dream job. So when I walked out of the newsroom knowing that it would be for the last time, I was a little emotional. So then you're like, well, why did you quit? Well, author Ryan Holiday describes the place where I was at as the pinch between the way that you wish things were and the way that things are. And the way that I wish things were was that we lived on a healthy, vibrant planet that we cared for, that there was clean air, that there was no plastic pollution or pollution from oil and gas, that forests and oceans are thriving, and that everyone had access to cheap, clean energy. And guess what? We can live in that world, but first we got to start talking about it more often. We need to talk about nature and environment and solutions. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Talk about it all the time. But that's just not the way that things are in mainstream media. I mean, for me, I started to feel like I was living in the movie Don't Look Up.
If I were to describe Don't Look Up in a nutshell, it would be an analogy of modern day culture and our inability to hear and listen to scientific truth.
Okay.
And if you're curious about that, I had an entire conversation with former CBS and ABC News climate producer Tracy Wolf and Emily Atkin from Heated. The link to that video is in the description. But my deeper reasons are really about you and Mr. Rogers. As a kid, my mom will tell you that I was obsessed with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. As an adult, I heard something that Fred Rogers said that really stuck with me.
My mother used to say, whenever there would be any really catastrophe that was in the movies or on the air, she would say, always look for the helpers. There will always be helpers, even just on the sidelines. That's why I think that if news programs could make a conscious effort of showing rescue teams, of showing medical people, anybody who is coming into a place where there's a tragedy, to be sure that they include that. Because if you look for the helpers, you'll know that there's hope.
And how often do you see helpers in the news? Sometimes, sure, but not often. And there's that incredible wisdom from Adrienne Marie Brown, who said, what we pay attention to grows. Basically, the law of attraction. So what if we apply that to what we pay attention to, what we watch, and we start focusing more on all of the helpers, all of the doers, all of the scientists, the farmers, the moms, the kids who are doing things to care for and protect our beautiful, marvelous planet. If we do that, I think that the good gets even better, that the good spreads and has a real ripple effect. And I'm not saying don't watch the news, don't pay attention to anything bad. I think it is especially important in a democracy that we stay informed. But there is a line between informed and overwhelmed. And that brings me to why I said I quit because of you. It's because you are here on YouTube. And I want to have a direct relationship with you. I want to have a conversation and connect with all of the other people who love our marvelous planet as much as I do. And YouTube is now where more Americans watch things than anywhere else, more than Netflix or any of the major media companies. And it's growing. 2.5 billion people around the world. And the average in 2025 was that each one of those people watched nearly 49 minutes every day. I think more of those minutes can be, more of those videos can be about nature, about our environment, about how we care for it, how we reconnect with it, how we reconnect with one another. Because I want us to deepen the intimate, sacred relationship that we have with our planet. And I just finished reading Joanna Macy's incredible book, Active Hope, and she says a lot of good things. But one of the things that she writes is that when life is dominated by urgent demands, we don't get the time needed to find our direction or determine what really matters. And TV news is constantly urgent. It's developing news, it's breaking news, and on and on. But here on YouTube, we can slow down a little bit. We can take time to add context, to give things meaning, to help us understand and focus on what really matters. And I think what matters is caring for this fabulous, beautiful planet. And I truly believe that the root of so many or all of our problems with one another and with our environment all stem from disconnection. So if we begin with the end in mind, what is the world you want to live in? What does it look like? How does it feel? What does it smell like? Dream big. And don't limit your answer because you think something's unlikely or impossible. Tell me about it in the comments because I want to read them and say, yes, yes to that. I want us to all get excited about dreaming this world that we want to live in and a world that we can live in. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel because I want this channel to be like a seed. Because when a farmer or a gardener plants a seed and they know that it might not yield anything for years, they don't say, ugh, what's the point? No, they care for the seed. They water it. They pluck weeds because they know eventually what that seed will yield. And when it comes to our planet and all of the increasing threats to nature and our air and our water, Joanna Macy said something else that I think is very relevant for this moment. Important changes often go through 3 phases. First, they are regarded as a joke. Then they are treated as a threat. Finally, they become accepted as normal. And right now, caring for our planet is very much viewed as a threat by some powerful politicians, by powerful oil and gas companies. But I think we're much closer to caring for our planet becoming normal, it becoming what's expected, and that doesn't just change our politics, it changes the world that we live in. It'll change the air that we breathe. Because as dark as the world might seem right now, never forget those famous words from Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has.
Bingo.
Thank you for sharing that, Andy. As you can probably tell,
thanks for doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it was personal. It is personal, which also made it a challenge because, my entire career, it's like the journalist is not the story, right? Like I'm the one that is presenting the story, that's explaining what's happening, that's taking you somewhere, but the journalist isn't the story. And in this moment, I've found myself a little bit as the story. So it was, it took a little bit of courage and some vulnerability, some courage to be vulnerable. But yeah, I mean, everything I said in that is just like truly from the heart. And I imagine that you and all of the other people who care about this planet, that I hope that resonates.
Well, I hope so too. And I was just thinking as I was listening to you're talking about YouTube. YouTube is a place you go when you want to fix something, among other things. Our dishwasher had some little tiny component that broke. Where did I go? YouTube, and I put in the make and some description, and there was some guy somewhere in the world who had figured out how to fix it, rather than calling someone. So if you think about that context of YouTube, it's kind of an interesting planetary.
I love that. YouTube is a place where you go when you need to fix something. Can I steal that from you, Andy?
That until you just watching your show. So I think you're onto something there. And Betsy Rosenberg, who will join us in a few minutes, is also she's focusing on the full landscape of from worry to action. But I do think this area of trying to flip the script toward historically the climate movement was mostly a no movement. Don't do this. Don't do that. Stop this. Bad people are doing this. And recently this discussion of abundance for energy is kind of trying to get past that, although now even that's being created internal debates around what climate solutions are and how do you craft a strategy. But there are others like on Substack now. There are many. Amanda Royal is very successfully articulating the good news around us that gets hidden by that landscape that when you turn on the news or you turn on your X or even Blue Sky feed, it's mostly negativity.
And I really like the way that you describe that, of like that the climate movement has mostly been no. It's like, don't burn oil and gas, don't pollute our air, don't pollute this river, right? Like it's the negative, it's the protection, it's the sense of loss. And unfortunately, I think the reality is like there is going to continue to be maybe an even greater sense of loss in the rest of our lifetime. So, there's a couple ways to approach that. Like we can approach that with like anger and sadness and worry, and like all emotions are valid. But my hypothesis is this question around like what happens when the yes is more common and maybe more powerful. That if we focus on gratitude, like such a simple thing, and I forget to do it every day, but like there is a huge difference in my life when I focus on the things that I have, the things that I'm thankful for. It shifts my perspective, just the way that I go through a day. And so I wonder, like, if we can start to apply that to this big, huge, awful crisis, what might happen when we just like appreciate a flower that's blooming in the spring? We appreciate the birds chirping in the morning. We appreciate that, like, crisp breeze on a spring afternoon. Like when we start to appreciate those things, I kind of wonder, Andy, if the climate solutions and climate action will just happen automatically underneath, that we start to just give more power to what we love. And Jacques Cousteau said, we protect what we love. So if we start giving more power to what we love, then I think we're going to start protecting it a lot more effectively. I hope.
Yeah. And by the way, there's a zillion stories out there to fill your bin with. And a lot of them relate to communication. I wanted to see if I could show something here, and then I'll bring in Betsy. This is just one tiny little example that I've blogged about and had people on my show. In Canada, there's this mapping project, myheat.ca, and it shows you two different things. It shows you solar rooftop deployment. It's a map using Google, imagery and stuff. And it also shows you the lack of weatherization. Homes that are not adequately insulated, they show up, they glow, in infrared. And this, I'm just showing you this as one tiny little story about positivity and about, think about what you could do with that information to drive a community's interest in improving their insulation of their homes. They get to see, well, my neighbors' homes are insulated. I wonder what they're doing.
This is like that positive peer pressure. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Environmental Voter Project. Nathaniel Stinnett, who founded that, something he says often, that like their tactic and how to activate environmental voters is basically that same principle of positive peer pressure of like, hey, your neighbors down the street have all voted. Like, when are you going to go vote? Your neighbors down the street have solar power and their bills are half of what yours are. Don't you want to save on solar, on your monthly electricity bill too? So yeah, I think that positive peer pressure can work.
Yeah, and connecting people that way. And how much of what you plan to be doing is sort of the asking questions of your audience to get their input on what they're seeing and doing?
I mean, I hope that came through in the first video, and I hope that it's something I can continue to build upon. That, I want the comment section, my inbox. I'm still refining the website, but there is a way to also just contact me directly through my website. So I want all of these to be places where it's a dialogue, not a monologue. Like I've had enough years of being, the all-knowing correspondent or anchor behind the news desk. Like I've done that for a long time. Like I want to have more of a dialogue. So yes, I'm very much open to ideas and questions and story ideas.
So I'm going to bring in Betsy, who got started in the 90s on this journey of trying to engage people on both the problems related to climate and solutions in radio at CBS, and then onward through a bunch of different platforms. Hey, Betsy, also in California, right?
Good morning, both of you. So happy to join you. I hope you don't mind if I sip on my caffeine. With daylight savings time, I thought I had much more time to sleep, and all of a sudden the alarm went off. Wake up and smell the coffee. Wake up and smell the carbon.
Yeah. So let's take a quick dark dive into why each of you found the sort of mainstream broadcast medium so frustrating. I know, Chase, you went into this in depth with Tracy Wolf and with Emily Atkins, so I don't expect us to dive deep, but how much of that was part of the issue, dealing with that? What you said earlier, TV and the news is really about things that are breaking news, right? And climate change is this building progressive prismatic challenge. So when did that become sort of an unsustainable fit for you?
Yeah, I mean, like that, it's the question that people have asked me, publicly in settings like this, but also just like in my private life, and my, friends and family are like, well, what was your breaking point? And the unsatisfying answer is that there wasn't one. There wasn't just like a morning that I woke up and said no more. It was, kind of that death by a thousand cuts. And I should say there was nothing malicious at NBC. It's not like NBC is actively trying to suppress climate coverage. That is not at all the case. And as far as I know, they're going to hire a replacement for me. So they do care about this. I think it's more like a fundamental issue with mainstream legacy media, that there is somewhat of a lack of understanding about like how so many, virtually all issues are connected to climate change in some way, and then also helping them helping producers and decision makers understand why it should actually be in a newscast, and not at the end of the newscast, but in the A block, early in the newscast. I mean, we could probably fill an entire 2 hours just talking about what the war in Iran is doing to our planet. And so why are we talking about the war in Iran without talking about the impact on the air that all 8 billion people on the planet breathe, right? Like climate is connected to, I won't say every story, but almost every story. And so over time, it's just that like, why is this thing that affects all of us not higher in the newscast? Why aren't you giving this more time? And I think, every person has their sort of, their limit. And at some point it's like, I just wanted to focus more on the journalism, more on the communication, more on the connecting with people. And I also want to be able to have the freedom to do stories that I don't think NBC would run. Like, I have lots of kind of woo-woo, I guess you would say, ideas about what it means to like be in nature and be with nature, and like how that also benefits us like physically and mentally. Like there's a lot of that ground that I want to explore as well.
And there's a lot of that ground too. That's wonderful. So Betsy, can you just kind of describe in a thumbnail your your breaking point. Well, you know what you explain a little bit about what you were doing in the '90s when you started your radio project, and then how you transitioned.
Thank you. Well, in a thumbnail, my goodness, 29 years this Earth Day. I'll do my
Yeah,
best.
sorry.
No, I'm sorry, really. Lot to say. Working on a book, but in the meantime, things are in flux. Let's see. As a kid, people say, "How'd you get this way, Betsy? Why are you so green? Was it the way you were raised?" I said, "No," but in third grade, it bothered me that my fellow students were throwing their lunches away. Go figure. I had like a green, I call it an extra green chromosome, or W chromosome, for waste prevention. I just didn't like waste. It seemed wrong to throw away good food. I grew up to find out not everybody has that obsession, and that's where it began, I guess. And then it was quite, recessed. It was recessed, and then it kind of blew up when I got married. My husband, who's from New York, I'm from the Bay Area. We will welcome you here happily, Chase, Northern California. He was shaving and wasting water and brushing his teeth, and the water was running down the drain. And I grew up with droughts. He did not, and I did my. And after a year of operant conditioning, I was a psych major. He says brainwashing. He said, okay, I get it now. I've changed. I take the, wire hangers back to the dry cleaners. He's a lawyer. I do double-sided, copying when I do briefs, but I'm only one guy. It's a big landfill. Why don't you go be the Martha Stewart of trash? Boy, does he regret that. So I started Trash Talk Minutes, Earth Day 1997. Boy, does that make me feel old. I was young when I started. My daughter was 2. My granddaughter is 2 now. Yeah, here they are. Right
Oh, my
here.
Lord.
Yeah, there's a reason. Well, the reasons I do this, for every child to be, every grandchild, every niece, every nephew, everybody to come. It's so not fair what we're doing. But I digress. So my news director figured I'd have 3 weeks worth of waste prevention tips: reduce, reuse, recycle, rot. 10 years later, I retired Trash Talk, but midway through, I changed the name and the focus to Eco Talk, because I went from garbage to global warming. Oh my God, this is much scarier. Right about that time, Air America came along. It was a liberal, one of the few liberal progressive radio networks out there. Rachel Maddow was on. One of us went on to TV fame and fortune. Al Franken, quite a few other notables. And the progressives charged me to do my show Eco Talk, but it was a 1-hour program, 3 to 4 interviews, so 15, 20 minutes each. I never had, and I have to the day, not have any trouble coming up with story ideas with guests. So 2.5 years went weekly and then daily. Then they went bankrupt, taking my significant investment with them. But I knew too much to quit. So did internet radio for about 9 years. And then along came greentv.com, a guy who had a great URL, was looking for content. I was a content creator looking for a good platform. I had resisted going online because I said, I'm just going to reach the choir. I've always wanted to reach, we need to reach beyond the choir, right? And because the internet is more self-selecting. So I tried like heck to get Chase's dream job. Thank you, Chase, for telling me why. I'm sure I would have ended up myself, if not getting fired for being too honest. And I pitched, Jeff Zucker at CNN, I could tell you all the names that I went to, and they all had some excuse for why they couldn't do it. Our viewers aren't interested, doesn't poll well. Well, since when is the news based on popularity? And you think people really want to hear about bombed, school children? What Chase said, especially in that video, I love everything you said. I can't tell you how many people sent it to me, Chase, and said, he's channeling you, Betsy. He's channeling you. You've got to reach out to this guy. And so we met on a river rafting trip in the middle of an awful fire in Sun Valley, Idaho.
We'll not forget that day. Yeah.
It was like, should we go out? It's really smoky. And as if it was like a joke, right? A cosmic joke.
We were just quickly for people listening, we were at a climate conference in the Sun Valley Forum in Idaho. And it was, kind of the last day adventure day of like, let's get outside and enjoy nature and this beautiful river and go rafting. And we're driving up there and there's a huge wildfire burning. And I've covered plenty of wildfires. And so I recognize I don't know if this is going to be a good idea for us to be out breathing this air. And so I just felt like the irony of us trying to be outside and enjoying nature at a climate conference when there's a major wildfire burning was just deep irony.
And I had the same feeling because as a reporter, I covered a lot of fires for KCBS before I did Trash Talk. And I knew I had more than a lifetime's worth of, bad air in my lungs. But here's a quick anecdote. When we got back to the hotel, it was like 88, 89 degrees outside, smoky as heck. They had a fire going in the gas fireplace, which I've seen a lot in the middle of summer. And I've complained to the hotel or the restaurant manager. I said, why do you have this on? Ambiance. I said, do me a favor, turn it off for a week and see if anyone complains. It's hot, it's smoky. Here at a climate conference where people were staying, they had a fire burning. It's like, what's wrong with this picture, right? The disconnect. So that's a bit of my story. I can give you the last year's update, but I don't want to dominate here.
Yeah, no, this is good. And here I'm just showing the latest from Media Matters coverage the last few years. Now one thing that comes up, and actually Joe Whitty, who's a longtime meteorologist, he was at NBC. Actually, he's in the comments here. Hold on, let me just change the landscape so we don't lose Betsy. Joe Whitty says, sort of goes back to what Andy has talked about, finding space in the paper or on the TV screen for slow-moving and invisible threat. And Joe was the NBC correspondent on for weather and climate for a long time, back in the days when Betsy was doing her radio work. And Joe, it's great to hear that. But this issue of incremental stories, like let's pause for a second and let's think we're talking about economics. And you guys are the national debt reporters. We got to get the national debt in the headlines. In the meantime, you got the stock market going up and down, and you have Strait of Hormuz shut in, and you're talking about the deficit, or the deficit is kind of in a generic long-term phenomenon that's one of those looming issues. And climate change has all these components that are dramatic, like wildfires here or a heat wave there, but it's still incremental. So are we just expecting too much of these media entities?
I don't think so, but I also I understand we're trying to, compare climate change to something else, but we don't eat dollar bills. We don't drink coins. Like this is our life. This is the food we eat, the water we drink. So is the national debt bad? Is it a really important story to cover? Absolutely. But they're very real threats to our lives. And Betsy's just said, I can't believe she's a grandmother. Betsy said Betsy's a grandmother. She probably wants her grandchild or grandchildren to have a beautiful, healthy planet. And what grandparent doesn't? Right. So that's just where I come at this from.
Oh my goodness, so much. I by the way, I've never seen it as invisible or incremental. It's, I guess, an Eskimo sees, all kinds of snowflakes. I see climate change wherever I go, and not just climate, oceans. There's, what's going on with, wildlife and plastic pollution and everything. And it just has been mind-boggling, mind-bending that my former broadcast news industry does not see the potential to tell the most interesting, important news. And when Jeff Zucker famously was asked, why don't you do more climate coverage? That was about 10 years ago. That's when I started harassing him. He said, well, we know we should do more. We just don't know how to make it interesting. Well, I do. I've done at that point about 3,000 interviews on it. You just don't know where to look. You don't know how to connect the dots. You don't know how to focus on the gazillions of solutions and solutionaries. And guess what? We will never run short of challenges, never run out of solutions, and never run out of people, as you say, who are doing this incredible work that people don't know about. And now that people are finding out about our planetary pickle, they're giving up. It's too late. No, it's not. You just got to listen to what's going on and join us. We need you, and you'll feel better.
Joe Whitty actually just added another comment from LinkedIn here. That's pretty interesting. It's a story tip. Check out Eco Nana. Grandmother.
I was actually smiling. I'm sorry. I'm interrupting you, Andy.
I'm sorry. No.
About his comment.
Yeah. Grandmother for Climate Action, environmentally focused website of a proud grandmother of two and a lifelong Earth warrior, retired from leading NASA's climate site. Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Betsy, do I have to fight? Do I have to fight you for that story? Because that sounds so fascinating.
Oh, me too. That's a pretty good one. Well, I'm gonna.
I have a better idea. I'll tell you at the end.
We can collaborate with.
I think to a certain extent, this to me illustrates two things. One is the value of doing live shows as opposed to canned shows. Joe's out there and he just says, boom, do this. We can look it up and get in touch with EcoNana right away. Mm-hmm. There's another question that came in here just now from Cynthia Nori. Do the media companies now think they have to wait for a disaster to report on climate change based on what Andy just said? I mean, this gets at what, Chase, you dealt with this all the time.
I think I mean, that's a simple explanation, but I don't know that that's necessarily the most accurate explanation. I think it kind of relates to what you said earlier, Andy, about, this approach of just flood the zone, of just create chaos, constantly overwhelm the media with things to cover. And so they're just playing whack-a-mole with what to put in. And so I think in the world that we live in the country that we live in right now, where there's just so many things and so much chaos, I don't think it's an intentional thing. I think they're just trying to like whack-a-mole and how do we cover this? How do we cover this? How do we cover this? Oh my gosh, our newscast is full of awful things. We got to put some fun stuff in, but then the fun stuff takes away time for other important stories. And so it's just this like kind of lose-lose situation for the news media. I mean, honestly.
And people have said to me over the years, Betsy, people are not going to pay attention till there's a crisis, till there's a disaster. I said, which one do you want to talk about? They're happening every day, more and more and faster than climate scientists had predicted, which is the scary part. The dots are not being connected. And if they were, here's my question to you guys, rhetorical maybe, but I wonder if more Americans, let's just stick with our country, knew what we know, which is too much, right? And they could sleep less a night, we could sleep more. Do you think that we would see, an uprising? That's what I wonder. Or are we just psychologically so, tuned to tune out? Because, it's just that's to me, ignorance is a really bad reason to lose a perfectly good planet. And that's why I've been tireless, dogged, so committed I may end up committed, trying to get back on a mainstream platform. Because when I was on CBS network, people across the country heard me. My cousins I went to high school with, but it wasn't meaningful to me after a few years. This is important, and we need to broadcast it. And now the broadcast networks are dying anyway, but the planet's dying faster. The glaciers are melting faster.
But and I don't want to reject your dream, Betsy, but like you're doing that right now. Like we're live on multiple platforms, and
I'm over it. I'm over
video. YouTube, more people are watching YouTube than more than Netflix, more than any major media company. So like it's there's no longer like the gatekeepers of 3 networks or 4 networks. Like we all have access to be able to reach, as many people as care about this. The other thing that I think about a lot is like, how do we reframe what's happening from this like negative and sense of loss to something of like, well, let's appreciate what we have. I don't know. I don't know if this is the right comparison, but like we're all going to die, right? Like that is an inevitable truth of life. But we don't wake up every morning, I think, thinking about death, right? Like we think about the life that we're living now. Hopefully we're being present and enjoying the life that we have. And so I wonder if that approach might benefit our planet more, of just like the appreciation of like, here's what we have, like, let's protect it and love it however we can. Because I don't think the fear message has worked. I think it's kind of lost its ground in some ways.
Not just the fear message, but there's this sort of bigness message. Climate change is this global phenomenon that I've described it. I've described this aspect of it. I call it the scale monster. It's the scale of it makes it immovable. And when you really carefully dissect what we call climate change, the problem of climate change, it's really mostly about building a better relationship with climate and energy. And as soon as you start to take it into its pieces, get at those prismatic aspects, not only does that make it seem, you can look at that and say, oh, well, screw it. It's this multidimensional scale giant monster. Or you can say, well, that piece of the prism right there, I can work on that because I'm an engineer and I can design a better window. Or I'm a teacher and I can design a better curriculum. Or I'm an artist and I can come up with a better graphic. And then, so it's a better fit for humanity to think about building a world of people who are less freaked out about the bigness thing, the hyper object, as Adam McKay calls it, and focus more on getting at those prismatic elements. And if you have 8 billion people doing that, that's actually pretty mega kind of possibility. It just doesn't have that solve climate change aspect to it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I swear to God, I've been to probably 300 green conferences, from zero waste back in 1997 when I started Trash Talk to zero emissions. There's one thing that 100% of the time I notice. That is, the people there are the most positive, upbeat, alive people I know. Why? Because they have something, a secret that they don't want to be a secret. They know what's going on. They're up to the solutions. They're the solutionaries by definition of them being there. And I said, people are walking around looking glum. There's plenty of reason for that. But we're not depressed and angry. Well, we are, but not most of the time. Most of the time, you were like Chase. I'm sure you've been to other climate gatherings. The one in Sun Valley, people there have a sense of purpose. And when people say, you don't look your age, you can't be a grandmother, I say passion and purpose. Join us. We need you. Really, and the research is starting to show that, the medical research. One of the keys to longevity is have a reason to get up every day. And what I just want to say is, it's not just climate change, climate being the mother of all eco challenges, a great exacerbator. You got to chunk it down into sound bites. And that's why I've managed to do 5,000 interviews on all shades of green. And I've never run out. I've got 10 I would love to do this week, including you, Chase. I think that there's a way to do both. I think we have to let people know about the urgency, about all the facts, the data that show we are in deep doo-doo, really, but also show what's possible, and not just someday, what people are doing today. The whole key is to scale it and amplify, scale and amplify. And that's what I was hoping to do on a broadcast network, but I don't know if we'll have time to talk about it, but those experiences were very telling. And everything you said about it, Chase, corroborates what I experienced at all three networks in terms of the reasons given. I pitched the Today Show, during Climate Week in New York. They said, "Well, can you dumb it down? We got to be chipper in the morning." Yeah.
But,
well, and actually, sorry, go ahead, Andy.
No, go for it.
I was gonna ask. I don't know if you could put the bar graph back up that you had of the broadcast network's coverage, because there's one thing in there I wanted to point out that not bragging, but a point of pride was that. After the 2024 report from Media Matters, I reached out to them and said, like, hey, you're only looking at the Today Show and nightly news on NBC, but there's a show in the middle of the day that is national, NBC News Daily, and all of my stories run on NBC News Daily, which is a national show on NBC broadcast. I was like, why don't you consider counting that? And they did. They added NBC News Daily as part of their count for 2025. And so you see that bar graph, like, consistent, steady at NBC. And I think part of that is because they started counting this national midday show where my climate stories were running. But you still see, like, even that, like, small victory, but like none of these numbers, I don't think, are as high as they should be given, the scale of the problem. Mm-hmm. I also just wanted to quickly, if I can, address Ned Komar's question about, like, what would the skeptics say?
Yeah, I was going to.
And I also welcome. Yeah, I also welcome both of your perspectives on this. Ultimately, either climate change is real or it's not. We can boil it down to that. If it is real and we don't act on it, the risk is everything. If we act like it's not real, but it is, the risk is everything. So we have two paths. One path has no risk. One path has immense risk. From just a simple logical perspective, why would we not go down the path that has no risk and all benefit? If it turns out in 20 years that climate change isn't real and we've acted like it was, we have a cleaner, healthier planet. Everything is better, no risk. So to me, the skeptic's argument just doesn't make any sense.
Well, I want to subdivide this what he calls the skeptics here into two groups. Judy Curry, who I've known for a long time. She is a maximizer of uncertainty. She's looking at the science that goes into that whole arena, and she's developed a pretty solid career in that area of communication or miscommunication. Roger Pielke Jr. and Lomborg, but Bjorn Lomborg, I've had Roger on my show a couple times. His view doesn't actually. There's a lot of overlap in the Venn diagram between Roger and the realistic approach to the climate problem. What he has said historically is that we're often missing other sources of vulnerability or loss. In other words, where people build houses, if they're not tornado resistant, you get more deaths. And then people can quibble forever what's happening with tornadoes in a changing climate. It's actually really complicated, and there aren't clear data there. But we know for sure that we're building a shitload of really crappy housing in zones that are tornado prone. So you can have constructive, solution-oriented conversations on that facet of the climate challenge, which is making our communities and our infrastructure less vulnerable to climate hazards, period. Some of the hazards are intensifying because of global warming, and some are not. And so you can have that conversation. Lomborg too. I mean, I was on your Lex Friedman's podcast with Bjorn for 4 hours, and we had a lot of overlap, along with areas of divergence. So there are sort of people, contrarians, et cetera, whatever you want to call them, who are really not constructive. And then there are others that, if you have conversations, you can find ways forward. At least that's been my experience.
But also the risk of not acting like climate change is real is everything. So like, I just don't see the argument for like picking into uncertainty. I think we should still act like it's real. And by the way, it is. 99.9% of peer-reviewed science says it's real. So I don't know why 99.9% of the scientists on the planet would conspire to make up something when, by the way, most of these people are not even making that much money. It's not like they're getting rich off of concocting some sort of lie like the climate skeptics
but the
say they are.
protesters are getting paid. Don't you know? Whenever I get accused, when they say, you guys, all you climate people, you're just in it for the money. Would you like to know how much I've personally invested in my green media career? No, you don't want to know.
Well, I'm also currently making $0. So,
well,
this is not a get rich scheme.
I have the frustration without the paycheck. So good for you.
Well, let's see. I'm trying to help maximize your visibility to the tiny extent I can. What are your, going forward? I want to get a little bit into what you plan to do on the YouTube and the like. How frequently will you be posting there? Obviously, you've laid out this approach that focuses on solutions, which is great. And so, just to articulate a little bit about the goals and how people can help you fulfill them.
I mean, I think the big goal is helping break this illusion or this lie that we are separate from nature, that we are not dependent upon our planet for life. Like the clothes that we wear, the technology and these computers that we're using to talk to each other and other people, all of this comes from the earth. Like we need the earth to live, and we forget that in our busy, hectic, chaotic lives where we go inside and we close the windows and door and we have heat, we have air conditioning, we have purified water. Like we don't have to think about things that humans had always had to think about for, our entire existence on the planet. So how can we move backward a little bit and remember some of these things? That's kind of the big picture goal. So so I want to talk more about some of these like spiritual, physical, biological, medical connections that we have with our planet, with the outdoors, with nature. The next couple of videos, one I'll be posting actually just in the next couple of days, is an interview with well-known climate scientist Katharine Hayhoe, making the case that she often makes that the nearly 2/3 of Americans who identify as Christians should be the ones who are on the front lines of climate action and protecting our planet. So I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation. And then after that, I'm talking with Benji Backer he started a group called Nature is Nonpartisan to try and bridge this divide and help us remember, help us realize that we actually don't disagree on this. Politicians and lobbying campaigns from oil companies have created this narrative that, Democrats are just crazy environmentalists and, Republicans are. No, who doesn't want clean air? Who doesn't want clean water? Who doesn't want farmers to be thriving and successful and growing the food that we eat without pesticides and chemicals? Like, we all actually agree on a lot. Oh, and by the way, energy independence comes from the sun and wind with a little bit of help from batteries. Like, there's actually a lot of agreement here, but our politics has led us to disagree and the other side. So those are my next two conversations, which I hope are really, constructive and positive and more forward-looking.
Yeah, politics is so dysfunctional. We've only touched on that. There's probably no time, but do you know that I'm sure you do, the Republicans always used to say, I don't even think they'll dare say it anymore, not today, we care about clean air and clean water. Everybody wants clean air and clean water. They never mentioned climate change. So that was like, they got the memo, clean air, clean water. Well, guess what? They're lifting all the restrictions on forever chemicals, on mercury, on Roundup, all the stuff that is so much for Maha, Make America Healthy Again, right? How much sway does RFK Jr. have? So the hypocrisy is off the charts. They're this administration not even pretending that they're doing anything other than taking us off a climate cliff and health cliff. And it's a scorched earth approach. So we have to speak out loudly. Also, we haven't mentioned Fox. I really believe that Fox News, as I say, is a big reason for, the disinformation. It's not by accident. I've been on Hannity more than a dozen times, and Tucker Carlson. When I dared mention that humans are part of nature, I got death threats. I'm talking 15 years ago. So when I hear about people getting death threats, they're crazy. They really are, because I mentioned something that is a fact. So that, and they're still lying about climate change, Fox is. How did they get away with that? I say it's getting away with murder, because people are dying from climate change, and people may not evacuate during a huge fire or flood because they've been in that place for so long and they never got the floods and fires, never got that bad, or the storms. Now it's weather on steroids, and they don't evacuate. And I'm so obsessed. I take recordings of people who have lost family members or property because they didn't evacuate, because here's the signature of climate change. We've never seen anything like this before. And I take notes. So I want to do a public action lawsuit public interest lawsuit, go back and interview all these people. Did you get your news primarily from Fox? If so, did you think it was just a big hoax? Might you have evacuated or evacuated sooner had you known the truth? They're still lying about climate change. If they can't get away with lying about COVID anymore, or election fraud, why are they getting away with this? Theft of our children's and grandchildren's future. Okay, my rant is over on that, but I had to get that in.
Yeah, no, it's a huge issue, and the feedback loop between the people who are in power right now and Fox creates this nonstop stream of information that people can then put on their, like I visit MAGA Facebook pages and try to keep track of conversations in these other parts of the culture, and it can be really discouraging. And by the way, a lot of that's on YouTube too. And so I guess that gets to the next question. Before we had the privilege, I was at the New York Times for 20 years, had the privilege of being, one of those unitary voices, and you were at CBS Radio and at NBC, where we kind of owned a big chunk of the conversation. And now on social media, to have bigness, to become big there, quite often you have to be at the edges of arguments. You have to be, and how do you both think, you're both on YouTube, and how do you think you can work to build audiences there amid the tendency we all have, not all, but many have, to migrate to simplistic kind of edge-driven discourse? Chase, you first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with making something that's good that people want to watch, because there's some crap on YouTube. I think so. That's the first step, is just making things that are good, which I think my many years of experience in television will help me with. The other thing I think is that making things that, like you said earlier, Andy, like help people solve a problem. Maybe it's in their own life, help people understand their world more. Or that just is like an interesting, fascinating conversation that people want to share and say, like, oh my gosh, I'm a Christian. I've never thought about like reading the Bible in this way. I got to send this interview with Catherine Hayhoe to my Sunday school group. And so I think if you create things that are good, that people want to share, that help people understand their world, and that help them solve a problem in their life, help them understand how they can live more sustainably and also not act as an individual, I think that in time, those things will catch on. I mean, there are climate channels on YouTube that have, 1 million subscribers, but I think that's still like an under-reached audience, or kind of a neglected audience. If, we believe the Yale and George Mason research, and I do, that close to 2/3 of Americans are worried about climate change. Well, 2/3 of Americans is what, like 210 or so million people. So I think there's a huge audience for this on YouTube.
And then on the energy side, I want to show you both a clip. John Sutter, who was a wonderful CNN opinion journalist a long time ago. He's now out in Portland as a journalism professor. He did a project in 2015 leading up to the treaty convention that resulted in the Paris Agreement. He went all over the place in the series. He went to Woodward County, Oklahoma, which a national survey had identified as the most skeptical county on global warming in America. And he's from Oklahoma, so he had a little bit of a cultural, fluidity. He could go there and talk to people. And this is like not even a minute. I think it's a minute. But it's worth listening to. Let's see if this works.
I'm a real firm believer in climate change. Well, I'm employed in the oil field.
I have an oil and gas company.
If there's no oil field, there's no jobs.
Our whole economy runs on fossil fuels.
Now you might say the environment is perfect today because God ultimately controls the environment. We're going to try to have a solar system big enough to supply all the needs of our house.
That last line blew my mind. So here's a guy, he's actually a creationist. He had invested personally in creating a playground there with dinosaurs and people living together. Like the world's only 6,000 years old. He worked for an oil company. He thinks God controls the environment, and he's getting off the grid using solar panels. And it just showed to me so powerfully. And by the way, the reason, John dug in more, of course, he's libertarian, and he doesn't want to pay a check to a utility if he can do something himself, God damn it. And he doesn't, but he would never vote for Hillary Clinton because he doesn't want the government to tell him what to do. So that back in 2015. So that just says to me, again, when you get granular, when you have a conversation, when you get beyond sort of yes and no questions about climate, if you went there and tried to convince him that global warming was a problem, I think it'd be a losing proposition. But you can have a great conversation about solar policy. And that's all around us, I think. And what do you think of that?
I mean, I think that's a representative of a lot of the people who are on YouTube who also aren't necessarily being communicated with. That when you put climate stories on mainstream news, like those people probably aren't watching it. But yeah, like it's the preppers, the people that want to be off the grid understand, like, well, the way that I'm truly independent is that I don't need to rely on someone else to drill and distribute and refine oil and gas, that I'm just plugged into the sun and I'm plugged into the wind. Excuse me. And oh, by the way, the sun is never going to send you a bill for energy. Neither is the wind. So if you want a lower monthly bill, we should lean more into wind and solar because you're spending money on oil and gas anyway. Why not invest in the infrastructure that's going to give you 100% free energy?
Yeah.
And I'm driving around in my EV, hearing about people are up in arms about the price of gas. There are almost affordable EVs right now, and we wouldn't have these wars when they went into Iraq. Some of us were on the streets protesting, knowing there was probably no, weapons of mass destruction, but there was oil, and yeah, I've got, my problem is I have too much to say. You can imagine 29 years of experience. But I just want to say John Sutter was a writer on climate change for CNN. Most of his stories ended up, online, digital. Like I noticed that, and I'm sure that's what you're talking about, Chase. Why aren't they front and center instead of just putting them online? Although more people are online now than 15, 20 years ago when I was tracking it in particular. He's doing a study on shifting baselines right now, which is probably one of the most interesting concepts I've covered. If we have a moment, would love to share what that is, because that gave me chills when I did that interview.
Well, yeah. He's doing a long-term film project, kind of like that famous documentary series 28 Up, where he's going back to the same communities year after year and this gets at the incremental nature of change, where you lose a sense of, each generation is born with a new sense of normal.
You lose the memory, so that my daughter will never know what I grew up with running around. I grew up in a walnut orchard in Santa Clara Valley, now Silicon Valley. There was a creek and we would watch the tadpoles turn into little baby frogs in the spring. That's not there anymore. Just running around till after dark, till dinner's ready. She went to camp, luckily, in Maine. But otherwise, she didn't do that. And so she won't miss what I miss. And her daughter won't miss what, maybe going to camp in Maine. Maybe those options won't be there by the time my granddaughter grows up. That is a scary thought, that to not even know what was, or to what we're fighting for. And with each successive generation, we lose more of that memory.
Although there is a flip side, she'll know about heat pumps, and we didn't have those to even think about back then.
Okay.
So there are positive shifting baselines as well.
I wouldn't do it if I didn't believe in positive and hope. People think, well, it's too late. I think, no, it's not. It will be if you keep ignoring these issues, but it's not yet.
Yeah, and Betsy, the other side of that also is like there is like some of those parts of nature aren't here anymore. Of course, that is heartbreaking. Like it truly upsets me, but there is still a lot that is here. And so that's one of the things I want to focus on is like, how do we appreciate what is still here in order to protect what is still here? Because we can't go back and like, you know, bulldoze Santa Clara and try to like restore these ecosystems. Like that is just not realistic, but we can protect what we still have.
William McDonough, famous green architect, 25 years ago, one of my early years interviews, he said, the question is really, how do we love our kids, country, and planet? And I've repeated that many times.
That's a good one.
And we'll add grandkids.
Yeah, well, this all just emphasizes to me there's plenty of work to be done in your new arenas. Yours, particularly, Chase, and for those of us who grew up mainly in the 20th century, like me and Betsy, there's still new frontiers as well.
I have an idea. Can I share it?
Of course.
By the way, I love, and when they talk about, you know, act of God, I say, no, it's actually an act of man. And it's not a natural disaster. It's an unnatural disaster at our own hands. Language is so important. And there is a whole group of victims that have come together to try to get word out about what happens to their lives when the camera crews leave after their homes have been wiped out and their businesses. Here's my idea. What do you think? The ABCs of our environmental future: newspaper, radio, and TV. Andy, Betsy, Chase on YouTube.
We're doing that right now.
Wow, that's interesting.
If we're doing forces, we can get out there big time. I'm an environmental media pioneer, but I'm a social media putz. I suck at that. So maybe together.
Well, you know, you're onto something really important that I want to just, maybe we can close out in the next couple of minutes with. I don't know if everyone has to get off right at
we have to close. I thought we could talk about this all day.
We could.
I mean, we can. But
I'm actually on the board of a local group here called Climate to Thrive, and we have a board meeting coming up shortly. But I can stay on. But anyway, the thing that you mentioned is the idea of collaborative approaches to communication. When I started my blog when I was at the New York Times called .earth in 2007, from 2007 to about 2014, the blogosphere around these issues, David Roberts and me and others, was very collaborative. It was a lot of cross connecting. Even when we were arguing, there was a lot of, you know, I would say, well, David Roberts just said this about, or Joe Rahm over in his special place. Yeah, but we were connecting to each other. We were engaging. We were highlighting each other's work. It was a networked approach to communication, and then it eroded, and that went away. Now I think it's partially because everyone's so desperate to maintain time on site, which is one of those metrics or whatever. People don't click. They don't link out, and unfortunately, like on Substack, I look at the data. Hardly any readers click on links. You know, I loved as a blogger infusing my articles with links to all the background context, but in the world we're in now, maybe it's because everyone's in a hurry, no one's actually digging in further. But the collaborative potential is absolutely there. I on my Substack, I'm doing a whole series called Other Voices, because these issues are way too big for one perspective and one specialty. So the more we can keep in touch with each other about when you're doing something new, that making sure others know about it, other media, other communicators, the better off I think we'll all be. That's just one of my thoughts going out. Any last thoughts from both of you? Maybe Betsy first, and then Chase, you can close it out.
Let's see. I just saw this morning Jane Fonda is doing a musical on climate change on Earth Day.
Yeah, I saw that.
I checked that out. I had to get out of bed, so I couldn't see all the details, but that will draw some attention. But you know, it shouldn't have to be Jane Fonda. That was the other thing. When I would go to networks, they said, "Well, if you can bring me a celebrity to co-host." Well, yeah. Mark Ruffalo said he would be a guest co-host on my, would-be show. But guess what? They're actors. They're celebrities. They're not going to do a weekly or daily show. And so it was always a catch-22 when I went to pitch them. And you mentioned, Joe Rohn, David Roberts. I interviewed them 20 years ago, 2 decades ago. That should matter to a network, that kind of experience. And I think they were afraid of somebody who knew too much. I kind of got that unofficial feedback that they don't want somebody who will actually talk about it as plainly as we're talking about it here. So shame on them. I'm working on a book called Climate Collusion, all about dereliction of duty, media malpractice. They are a big part of the problem. And in the absence, in the void of proper coverage, Fox all along, night and day, television and radio, has been saying it's a big hoax. And if people don't believe that's a problem, we have a dinosaur in chief 2.0. And if he can stand up in front of the UN in the middle of Climate Week, when there's thousands of us climate experts running around Manhattan, and say it's a big hoax, green scam, biggest hoax ever perpetrated against man. WTF? We have an eco-illiteracy crisis, folks, and it is costing us every day. And voting is the most important thing. But if we don't bring the public along, if we don't educate and engage the greater public, we will not win. I bet my life on it because I have, and a lot of money too.
Yeah. So Chase, last thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say I still have a very optimistic perspective on this, even given the things that the president is doing. To reference, actually, I love the original Scream movie. And there's a line in it where they're talking about like the rules of horror movies. And one of the rules is that the killer always comes back for one last scare. And I feel like this moment is that one last scare from the killer. It is their last gasp of holding on to fossil fuels. Yes. And so I just don't think it's going to last. I think when the pendulum swings, I think it swings back for good, permanently. I really believe that. And so that's really where I want to focus on the YouTube channel. Of course, if anyone's watching, would certainly appreciate it if you subscribe and follow along as I start releasing videos, the next one in just a couple days. I also just want to reach people who haven't been reached by traditional climate coverage. And part of that is going to be, Betsy might hate this, and I hope you don't, but like, I might not say climate. I might not say climate change. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of people who, even though they agree with you, they've lost you because of that word. And as unfortunate as that is, I don't know that I can change how people perceive a word, but I think I can impact how they perceive the world. And so if that means that I don't say climate change, but I'm talking about climate change, maybe that's what I do. Because we can say that burning oil and gas makes the planet hotter, and the hotter the planet gets, our weather gets more extreme and destructive. Well, that's climate change, but I didn't say climate, so
that's why the three of us should join forces, because I believe we need to be more direct, that the times of being euphemistic didn't work. You absolutely are right. You're not wrong. But I think we also need talking straight. And what I tell young people who are so depressed, I just say, the good news is the bad news. Things are so bad, to your point, Chase, that we're seeing the ugly underbelly of what's wrong with America, greed, power, money, ignoring our beautiful planet. And I have to think there'll be a backlash to that, and that better times will emerge, better programming will emerge.
And Betsy, please, and yeah, we need all voices. So like, keep going at it head on. I want to try a different approach though, because I feel a little bit like maybe how Thomas Edison felt when he was trying to figure out the light bulb. He's like, I found 1,000 ways or 10,000 ways that didn't work. And that's kind of how I feel, is that I found all these ways that didn't work. And one of the things that I haven't really tried yet is this other way of like, it's the indirect helping people understand the connection. So watch it evolve on YouTube. We'll see how it goes.
If I don't promote my own YouTube channel, I'll get killed, because I suck at self-promotion. But Code Green, don't go to Code Green on YouTube. You'll get some, hospital stuff. But go to at Betsy Rosenberg Interviews. By the way, the full name of my program, my series, whatever, Chase, you will like, because it's Code Green, Conversations for a Future We Want and Our Kids Deserve. That's what it's all about. I have always focused on the positive. Even Trash Talk, 1997, Sound Solutions for a Healthier Planet and People. On Air America, Greening the Red and Blue States, one show at a time. Yeah. That's the key.
There's one more comment that came in here from Facebook. Courtney Kaz says, make more desalination, hydroelectric dams that chemically filter water, make breakwater piers that also clean the water, explain how you can use solar in a way that is actually economical in real time. All of Texas could get on board if you can give us economical, safe water and solve our toxic summer ocean ponds and lakes. There you go.
I lived out in Texas Hill Country for 7 years. Just got back to the Bay Area. I could do a whole hour on that. We were the first ones in our neighborhood to put solar panels on in our development of 200 homes. Guess what? A couple of people followed. When we first got there, we were the only ones driving Teslas, so we weren't. And more people. I'm not saying we did it, but what you're saying, the social research bears that out, that if we don't see other people doing it, it can't be that big of a problem. If we don't see the newscasters talking about this, how much of an emergency can it be? And last thought, when people say, what do you mean more coverage? I hear a lot about climate change. I said, imagine if CNN, MSNBC, for starters, covered climate like they did COVID, a true emergency, life and death. The whole world changed almost overnight, changed behavior. This is bigger. More people have and will die from climate-related events. And that's what we need. That we were going to start a Green News Network. If anybody wants to do that, 24/7, we will never run out of stories. I promise.
No, that's for sure. So we've kind of run out of time, and I really appreciate both of you being here today. And Chase Kane, welcome to the non-network world.
Thank
good luck
you.
with the project. I'm happy to keep facilitating as much as I can with my little project here. And there's another comment came in, fresh from.
There is life after network news.
Yeah, I mean,
and I appreciate both of you in the work.
Sorry, there's a pretty good live audience right now. If you can go a little longer, we could just.
Yeah, I can. This is my favorite subject.
Yeah, I can go for maybe another 10 minutes or so.
Okay, so Justin Bass from LinkedIn says, fresh from Farmers Valley. Oh, that might just be a promotional book. Never mind. Goodbye. Oh, spam.
Yeah, I mean, to Courtney's point, I think I think part of what she's saying is like she didn't also say the word climate, and in a place like Texas, like that's probably what's going to reach people. If you say climate, you've lost the Fox News audience, but we need and want the Fox News audience. So, you know, I'm not saying that everything I'm going to do is like devoted toward that, but I do want to create content that is accessible and as an invitation to those people, because again, like the Fox News audience probably spends more time in the outdoors, probably spends more time in nature than an MSNBC audience or an MS Now audience, whatever it's called. So they love the outdoors, they love nature. I just don't know that they've connected the dots to how some of these policies are impacting the things and the places that they love. And so if we bridge that divide, then gosh, you've just won a huge segment of the American population, which would, I think, almost overnight flip our politics. That climate change wouldn't be a campaign topic; it would be a non-negotiable.
And it actually would be, as you were saying, and I agree with you completely on this. When terminology becomes divisive and sort of appropriated and owned by one particular segment of society, then we're in deep trouble. But you can see Texas by far is the dominant new renewables deploying state.
And yet they don't want to talk about it, which is really, we have to.
Well, no, they do. No, but you don't have to talk about it.
The politicians, not one Republican voted for the Climate Act, and Republican states, red states, are benefiting from the plethora of renewable energy.
They're not just benefiting; they're doing the work. It was actually under Republican governor Rick Perry that much of this happened. So it's like, I don't worry whether it's like the guy in Oklahoma. Am I going to spend my time going there with a sign that says climate emergency? Or am I going to just talk to him about solar? How do we maximize a capacity for people to have independent supplies of electricity?
Can I give you an
example? I've written, my first cover stories on global warming were all about the big global warming problem. And I look more and more about this as building a better relationship with climate and energy. You can get much more traction than selling that thing that became known through Al Gore and others as the climate crisis. And that's just, I mean, I wouldn't be prioritizing that going forward. At the same time, as was just articulated, we need it all. Emily Atkin is very much about a punitive reportorial dig in on fossil fuel companies who are doing bad stuff. Absolutely needed. Bill McKibben is who he is. He's kind of an evangelist. And I had him on my show too. And I've had Roger Pilkey on my show because he talks about vulnerability reduction, and he should. And it's a big chunk that people are missing. And so it's all part of the journey forward. The more diverse we are in our voices, the more respectful we are about the possibility of having cogent, constructive conversations with people across those divides that the Fox folks love to amplify, the better off we'll all be going forward.
Can I just have one note? Being the contrarian, sorry.
Yeah, well, one more quick thing from you, and then the last word.
So we lived in Texas Hill Country, an hour's drive from where those awful floods happened July 4th, all those young children, girls killed. Here's the problem with not talking about it. People would say, well, this is an area of flash floods, so we've been through them before, okay? Well, here's people in Texas, for the most part, don't talk about climate change. I wonder if the people who were in charge of that camp had consciousness that it's weather on steroids. This flash flood may be worse than the others because of our emissions, okay? They might not have put 7-year-olds right along the riverbank. That's the problem with not talking about it and being aware of it. and having it be direct. And that's why I think there's absolutely a need to do that. And of course, none of the tech, Rick Abbott, all the way Ted Cruz, they never once mentioned climate change. And then Trump showing up, the nerve, while he's rolling back our climate protections and regulation, hard fought, late in coming, the hypocrisy has got to stop.
I view this kind of as if you think about, like, if you've ever volunteered for a beach cleanup, typically you'll have people kind of line up shoulder to shoulder and walk down the beach and pick up trash. Well, imagine if you didn't have enough people to cover the width of the beach. Well, then you're missing a lot of trash in the sand. And so, yes, I think we need people talking about this directly. I also think we need more people talking about this in an indirect way and never saying climate change. And I'm not saying that's all I'm going to do, but I do want to explore that part of the beach, because there's trash that needs to be cleaned out of that beach. There are people that need to be reached that actually do care about this, that they think they don't care about it because, to Andy's point, the word has been co-opted. So I just want to explore and try different things. That's what this YouTube channel is going to be. So I appreciate the opportunity to encourage people to go there and watch. And of course, bring me story ideas. So Betsy, we're shoulder to shoulder on the beach and we're picking up different trash, but we're still picking up trash.
And I'm in Marin and you're coming to the Bay Area. So let's get together in real life.